the JTS email. If I don't know if you're a close follower of the JTS email, this news literally just went out to our broad audiences, and you are the first group of people to get to hear from our new director of the JTSA MFA in Creative Writing. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Ellie Gettinger. I'm the Director of Outreach for the Center for Lifelong Learning, and I'm here along with a bunch of different colleagues. I'm going to be introducing the Director of the Center for Lifelong Learning later. Her name is Lisa Springer, but I also want to thank my colleagues Connie and Aiden for being here today to help out. This is our last session in What's Next? New Ways of Engaging Jewish Sources. And the idea of source and text and storytelling is so intrinsic in what we do as an institution, but also as a people. And we're really going to get into the power of storytelling today with our speaker. I'm going to let my colleague Lisa share the information, but for now, I'm just going to be vague and you guys can wait a second. I want to thank our session sponsors. Today we were sponsored by Melissa Stoller in honor of her mother, Connie Berger, and Jenny Rubenstein and Yaroslav Fibashenko. They both sponsored at the Chacham level. For all of our future programs, you are welcome to do that as well. We have some sponsorship information in the chat. I also want to thank all of you for coming and being part of this learning community. It has been such a pleasure throughout this series to talk to people from all sorts of different JTS universes and to really get a sense of what's going on and what's next in what terms of what we're doing. I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Lisa Springer. She is the Dean of the Division of Lifelong and Professional Studies and the Associate Provost for Continuing and Digital Learning. In this capacity, she works to expand and innovate JTS's education for learners at all stages of life in terms of personal enrichment, like these classes, professional development, and, somewhere in between the two of those. Lisa has an incredibly lengthy resume of engagement in lifelong and extending education into new spaces. She worked as the provost of LIM College. She was the Associate Dean for Global and Strategic Initiatives at NYU, and she just brings so much energy and knowledge to this field, and we are so privileged to have her here. And so I am going to turn it over to Lisa to go on to this next part. She's going to be moderating today's conversation, but if you have questions for our speakers, please send them to me. I'll make sure they get them. If you have technical questions, you can send those my way as well. And thanks everyone for being here today. Lisa, I want to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ellie, and welcome everybody. I have an amazing announcement to make, which is that we have a director for our MFA program. This is literally hot off the presses. The press release went out, I think, 15 minutes ago. So Etgar Keret is the director of our new MFA program, and he's here today to speak with you. This is his first engagement in this capacity. So you're very lucky. I'm just going to give you a brief bio. He's one of the foremost writers of contemporary Israeli literature. His books have been published in some 50 languages and won numerous awards. In addition to being an internationally acclaimed virtuoso of the short story, Etgar explores a variety of storytelling techniques, including plays, screenplays, songs, animated and live-action films, comic books, and choreography. Etgar is an associate professor at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, and he's excited to guide the JTS MFA's program's vision and mentor emerging storytellers. And just on a personal note, I want to say that I've been working now with Etgar for several weeks on imagining the MFA, and I am so happy to be able to introduce him to you and to just tell you that hearing Etgar tell stories, a day when I hear Etgar tell a story, which is many days since we work very closely now, is a happier day than a day when I don't hear Etgar tell a story. So we're very lucky to have him with us. So great. Welcome, Etgar, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think what we want to start with is just you telling stories, and you've told me so many, and we'd like to share those. If you could tell us a little bit about how you were inspired to learn about storytelling from your father and from your mother.
Yeah, so first of all, I come from I like to say typically abnormal Israeli family, So my parents were both Holocaust survivors, I have two siblings. One of them is an ultra Orthodox Jew living in Mea Shearim, having 11 children and more than 50 grandchildren, which means that when my sister got to 50, she stopped counting. I think she's at the high 60s right now. And the brother who's a liberal left-winger who's very active in the Standing Together movement that put Palestinians and Israelis together. And my parents also were very much politically involved. And growing up in this kind of hub of different thoughts and beliefs, it was always amazing because my father said, it's so great that we have different opinions, because it's never boring and we all the time want it to be good. And you have a plan, and your brother has a plan, and your sister has a plan. And for me, looking back at those days where the idea of disagreeing seemed like something exciting and interesting, it was a really a wonderful example for me about how those things can work, among Jews and among people in general, that you can disagree and still survive your disagreement. And I think that both my parents were great storytellers. My mother was a sole survivor from the Warsaw Ghetto, so she basically didn't know anyone who had known her before the war. So what happened was that when the war ended, she had her memory of her life, but she couldn't have any exterior information. Kind of, if she didn't know anything, she just didn't know it. And I think that when I was a child, my mom would always tell me stories, and in those stories, she would say, one day I was sitting in a room in a ghetto and asked her which ghetto. And she wouldn't know. So she would say, is it really important? And she said, and then this tall man entered the room. And I said, was he an officer? And she said, is this important? I told you he had a long coat and a very deep voice. And I think that hearing all those stories of my mom that were never put in a context, because I usually, when we grown ups, we tell a story this way. I say, in the early 90s, I visited New York, and while I was going on the Fifth Avenue, so we give all this objective information, but my mom didn't have any of that. So I guess that they kind of trying to justify her own storytelling. She said, when you tell a story, nobody cares when it happened and where it happened. They care how tall you were, how you smelled, how much you cared for that, how much it was important for you. And I think that, till this day, and I think that you know that already. For example, for me, whenever we talk, I don't remember names of people because I say, but they're tall and they had a deep voice and a long coat. Well, I don't know how they call them, So I felt, I think, very early on that there was something in this storytelling that kind of offered some kind of a shared perspective. And I feel that with my mother being a Holocaust survivor and kind of having to deal with the Holocaust survivors narrative in Israel, which was very much this kind of narrative saying that, if you're a Holocaust survivor, you were a victim, you suffered, your life is ruined, you're the dust of the desert. Please come and say that on stage so we'll understand why we need the country of Israel. And I remember as a child that, when people would come in our neighborhood, there were very few Holocaust survivors. So they would come from the municipality and they would ask her to speak in official ceremonies. Then my mom would always have this sentence that she would say, I'm afraid there is a mistake here. I've been through the Holocaust. I don't work in the Holocaust. So this was her kind of sentence, kind of saying, look, I lived my life and I make my choices. I decide what I'm going to tell and when I'm going to speak about things. And I don't want to be this kind of pebble in this huge mosaic of trauma. I want to see my history as a Hollywood movie with me in the lead role. And yeah, it's a period movie. Yeah, and the period is the Second World War, and I happen to be a Jew, and things here are tough, but it's my movie. I'll decide if it's a comedy, if it's a drama. And I think that there was something very inspiring in this kind of a will to hold your own narrative, to create your own narrative, and not kind of to outsource it or to hang on something that had already existed. And I think that since I was a child, I kind of had this feeling that if I won't be able to tell a story, if I won't be able to engage in a dialogue that would make people, through my storytelling, understand how I perceive things, then I wouldn't be able to survive. Because seeing my mom compared to the other Holocaust survivors, then I knew that they were functioning physically, but that they gave so much up, basically to keep their intended role, and while she was able to do whatever she wanted. There was this kind of childlike omnipotence. And I must say that my father was also a very imaginative person. He survived. He survived the Holocaust by staying in a hole in the ground in what's now Belarus with his parents for practically 2 years. A little bit under 2 years. And basically, when I asked him how he kept his sanity being in a hole in the ground for so long, then my father would say that every day he would invent himself some kind of an alternative universe. Like, he didn't use this term, but like a word that was exactly like his word, but with only one thing that is different. For example, Nazis were looking for Jews, but when they found them, they gave them candies or something like that. And then he would say, every day I would live in one of those words that I created. Some of them were amazing, some of them were horrible. And as a child, I was unable to understand this. Like I'm saying, they murdered your sister, you're starving. Why making up a word in which, I don't know, only red-headed girls can rule the universe or whatever? And my father told me this sentence. He said, when you're in a very narrow space, it's your instinct to want to widen things up. And he said, and if you can't do it physically, you do it in your mind. He says it kind of eases you. It makes you feel a little better. You don't know, but you'll know one day. And I must say that, that about 12 years later, when I got drafted to the army, I found myself in a very dramatic situation where my best friend killed himself next to me in the small space where we would have to take shifts. And basically, I went with him to the hospital. He died. I went to the funeral, but the moment that I went to the army base, the army is not a very sensitive entity. So they kind of said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I'm okay." So say, "Okay, go back to your job." And I had to enter the same tiny room in which basically my best friend was bleeded to death, while I took him to the hospital. And I remember that I was in this small room with the bullets that had killed my friend in the wooden cabinet behind my head, and with the floor still being sticky from people not washing the floor well from the blood, and the door kind of closing, and me knowing that I have to be there for more than 20 hours. And I remember that I looked at the desk, and there was a computer and a machine gun with two magazines. And I was staring at it, no internet, no books, no phones. And I said, okay, this is your frame for the next 22 hours. And at this moment, I remembered my father saying, sometimes you can't widen things physically, at least widen them in your mind. One day you're going to get it, And I sat down there and wrote my first story. Practically, this was the first fiction story I've ever written. It was called Pipes, and it made those 22 hours pass. I wouldn't say quickly, but it made them move a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edgar. When you're talking about this, about telling your own story and your mother and your father telling their own stories, how do you imagine, how can we teach that to our students? It seems like such an exciting idea to me to really help people to find their stories, whatever those are, whether they're about themselves or about others, and their own voice. And I think we are so often pigeonholed into these ideas of who we're supposed to be, and we're supposed to fit another narrative. How do you think we can help people to free themselves of those restrictions?
Well, I think that many times when people come to write, they have this same stiffiness or awkwardness that you see when they interview somebody who's not proficient in that on TV. You know, it's really like sometimes if you watch sport, then let's say each basketball player would play in a different way. But when they do the interviews, they have the same pose and they say, I scored the winning basket, but the entire team had won the game. Next week, it's going to be a new show. And you say, but those people, they're so much of an individual. They can be aggressive. They can spit on the ground. They can do all kinds of things that only they can do. But the moment that they're interviewed, they're kind of trying to keep to say the way you're supposed to say it. And I can say to you that, you know, I was once a guest professor teaching a creative a writing a workshop in NYU. And in the first lesson, I asked the students, what's their dream? What's your expectation, you know, coming to study creative writing? And I can say that I think 80% of them said that they want to write the next great American novel. And I I said to myself, oh, I didn't say to myself, I said to them, okay, I wish I said to myself, but I said, oh my God, you guys you're in trouble. You don't understand because when you sit down to your page, you know, which paragraph is enough to be the first paragraph of the next great American novel. There is something about it that everything that you say won't be good enough. So I think that, you know, that the first thing that I want people to feel when they tell a story, that they're not telling it to the world. First of all, they're telling it to themselves. You know, sometimes, I don't know, before you go on stage, you look at the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, and if you don't like what you see, you don't always have to go to the stage, you know? And a lot of your work is learning to like what you see. That's part of the effort, you know, and not kind of second guess. And the idea, so I think that the moment that you neutralize anxiety and expectation and basically connect to the fact that there is pure joy about this idea of being in an environment where you have an effect and what you feel matters and all those kind of things that seem to be diminishing in our world. And I'm saying that, you know, that I feel sometimes that the word keeps changing, but we keep kind of operating by the same rules that were true a long time ago, you know. Like, you know, when I look at my son, I say, oh, you know, I wish you get a good, steady job. But who am I kidding? Like, what, in 40 years, he's going to go to his work? Like, you know what? And his CEO will be an alien, you know? So, for sure, the word cannot keep on going in the same pace that it used to go before. And it kind of creates new problems. And I think that one of the problems that this word creates is that with technology coming to help, and I thank technology for coming to help, then we're basically outsourcing many of our abilities. And I feel that among those abilities is our ability to imagine and to create stories and to deal with obscurity and ambiguity. And I'm saying that the same way that now it's more difficult for people to find the way without navigation. Now we're living in a world where it's much tougher for people, let's say, to imagine things. Just the idea of imagining things. You know, I gave a talk yesterday, and I said to the people in the talk, I said to them, I want you to do something, do a trick, shut your eyes and imagine Hitler a, a minute after he died. What position he was lying? Was he opening his arm? Was he in a fatal? Think about it. Each of you imagine it. And they each said something completely different. And I say, okay, now close your eyes and imagine Yihya Sinwar a minute after he died. And they said, we saw the photo. We saw the photo. But today, it's not even, imagine Donald Trump and Camilla kissing. You can't imagine it because you saw it. Imagine, I don't know, Donald Trump and Zelensky fighting each other in the Oval Room. Why should I do that? I asked the ChatGPT. It will imagine it for me. And I'm saying that the problem is not only that we're giving up all these abilities, but that we're totally unselective in our attitude towards them. Because I'm saying, my son can watch a film about Zelensky and Donald Trump punching each other in the Oval Room, and I would say to him, this is wrong. This feels wrong because the same technology could create Donald Trump hanging himself for a bridge, or running naked in the street. And what it is, it's not like a caricature. It's not like an adaptation. It's basically lying. This is how a lie feels. When I show you a person the same way he is, but he's not doing what he's doing, then I'm doing something that is wrong. But we don't have any buffer whenever technology changes something where we say, let's wait for a minute, let's vote on that. Is it good? Is it bad? It's always kind of coming, under the radar. And it seems as if it was always there. Nobody had to take a decision about that. Now, I'm saying that in a world like this, storytelling and imagining, it's really like, I don't know, when we were hunter-gatherers, we didn't need to go to the gym or do our Feldenkrais, we were okay. But nowadays, I'm saying these activities, if we want actively fight, to own this, we can easily slide in this word on other stories. And I'm saying that, my mom had this saying. She said, in good times, when you hear people shout over here, always run, because there will be boozer and cakes and girls and pot and everything, always run. But she said in bad times, when people shout over here, don't go there. That's where they kill people. And I'm saying that we live in a period, metaphorically, when people shout to you on your Facebook page, or on your Instagram, over here. My mom says, don't go. Don't go. Really, ask yourself where you want to go, what you want to do. I'm saying it's really like, it's like, it's funny that I even have to say that, but when I talk to my son, then let's say the idea of even choosing content, in that sense that we would argue which movie we're going to see. But on Instagram, you just see what they're showing you. It's really like, oh, that's a nice duck. Oh, this boat seems to be sinking. You have nothing to do with that, but basically you give up even on your ability to choose. And I'm saying that I see in a creative writing program, not just this thing in which you learn form and you learn craft, which are two amazingly important things. And in the end, you're going to be the next Philip Roth. This might happen and may not. But I believe that any person that will come and be able to tell a story, to tell their own story with the things that bothers them and the way, and with their own tone and with their focus, I think that it has such a huge number of way to serve us in this world. It's a little bit like Douglas Adams saying of all the uses that you can have for a towel. So I'm saying I wouldn't want to finish the Zoom about that. But I'm saying when you tell a story, you can basically reflect on an action and understand what you did wrong and what you did right, because I'm saying if I write a story about a lion attacking me, or if a lion is attacking me, it's not the same situation. The idea is when the lion attacked me, I say, oh my God. And that was what I'm thinking. But when I look at the situation, I say, Edgar, you're such a coward. You could have climbed the tree, So I'm saying it gives you this ability to reflect. It can heal. I have these procedures that whenever I'm angry at somebody, I write a story from their point of view. And it kind of forces me not to see them as purely evil. There are so many different ways to interact with storytelling. And I can tell you that as a professor, once a student came to me and he said to me, I don't know if I should continue studying. And I said to him, why? And he said, because I'm not sure that I reached the major league. So you have to tell me, like, if I can't reach the major league, I'll quit studying. And the things that I said to him, look, every weekend I play soccer for 30 years. And I never asked the people I play them, will I make it to the major league? Am I good at what I'm doing? Because I know that I suck, but I enjoy playing. And I said, people who write should find a way to enjoy writing. If you're suffering and you just say, in 4 years, it's like, I'll be a dentist, I'll be a writer, best-selling writer, and this is the same thing for you, then this is not the way that I would grow.
Right. So I just want to be sure to ask some questions about the program, just to be sure everybody
course.
has those answers. So one question, and I know, Edgar, we talked about this a lot, is you really want to be teaching as well as being the director. Can you talk a little bit about your intentions to teach in the program?
Yes, so I want to teach, but again, English is not my mother tongue, as you can notice. And so, for example, many things that have to do with writing, I don't feel confident to take the responsibility to, I don't know, comment about grammar, things like that. So basically in the workshop session, there will be a workshop leader and somebody who's American and who has English as a first language. And I'm just gonna come there to bother that person. Because the Jewish way of learning is chevruta, which is a very special and unique way of learning, and it's basically learning through debating. And one thing that I dislike in creative writing classes is that there's always one person who has authority. There's always this published author among those people who want to be published authors. And I really feel that even when there are debates and arguments, then it would be good for the students to see that they're with somebody who has a way and sees things in a certain way, but this could be seen in a different way too. Instead of kind of offering a solution, it can offer a space, and the space in which you can rotate and say, I'm closer to this opinion, I'm closer to that opinion. Because I can tell you that, if you surf the internet, there is nothing more common than finding almost any writer that you know giving 10 advices for writing. And guess what? Those advices are totally different and many times contradictory. And this doesn't mean that you can't guide people or help people when they're studying, but it does mean that for me, it doesn't feel correct to teach a creative writing as some sort of an exact science. When I have a student telling me this story is not good because it has too many commas, then I say, oh, we're not in a physics class, If you hate the guy, then tell me you don't like the main character, but don't go counting commas. We can get to that, but we don't pretend to wear a kind of a scientific cap. We just want to both delve deeper to ourselves and also see if the stuff that we're bringing out communicates in the ways that we want with the people around us.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and here's a question. I'll come back to some other more technical ones, but something we've discussed a lot is about Judaism. So question is, in what ways will Judaism inform the MFA program? what will distinguish it from any other MFA at a secular institution?
Yeah. So first, like I think in my visions that people can read in the website, my idea is that Jews were always very good at telling stories. And the reason that we were good at telling stories because we needed to tell our own stories. So I'm saying if I look, I don't know, at the US, then I'm saying that, or that if somebody who's not Jewish or not an immigrant can at times just read Walt Whitman and say, yeah, that's my country. That's how I see it. I'm a Walt Whitman guy. I don't need to think about it anymore. It's okay. But Jews coming, being immigrants, kind of having two-tier thinking about the reality around them, then to put this into order, they needed to create stories. And those stories were for their own community, but also for all the people around them, because they share their point of view and they share their ideas. So it doesn't matter if it's Philip Roth or Seinfeld, then Jews always had something interesting to say about what's going on. And what I claim is that this was the need of the Jews in the diaspora, but now I think it's a basic life skill. We all need it. I think that every human being need to have the access and the ability to be able to tell their own stories instead of choosing the ones that they like from the Facebook feed. It's really like, I highly recommend it. It will make your life feel like, you have more air in your lungs. So I'm saying that in that sense, I think that Jews have a lot to give. For example, in the program, every person who come with a project will have some sort of a bibliographer or librarian that will create attachment between these topics and works that it could be, so it could be Saul Bellow or it could be the Talmud. I can tell you that a lot of my stories were influenced by Rabbi Nachman from Breslau because my sister is an ultra-Orthodox, and I would read his tales. So I'm saying I can easily see that if Rabbi Nachman from Breslau is relevant for my work, how we can find in this huge cabinet things that would be helpful for all the people that will join us. And another thing is that, again, the way that I see Jewishness, and I think that's actually what's beautiful about the Jewish idea, that it can be seen in many things. But for me, I would say that the two things that I picked when I was a child, or even, maybe if I have to pick one thing, is that this is a religion that allows you to question. Because when you think all the great people in the Jewish history, I'm saying, Job, Moses, Abraham, they didn't have any problem arguing with God, it's which is something that is very unique. I can't find it, let's say, in Christianity or in Islam. And this idea is that God can take the argument and say, oh, what? Abraham, you don't understand anything. But okay, this was a good talk, I actually think that there is something, this and the Chavruta is really kind of building a system that it's not as if like in Hebrew we say, Naaseh v'nishma, like first we do and then we listen, it's like we're going to do it automatically. But there is something about the Jewish way of doing it is kind of challenging it and changing it. And I want this creative writing program to have this diversity in which people will come and say, I want to tell a story, but actually I don't want to write a novel. I want to write an opera about Jews in Louisiana in the 30s. And I want to do an opera about it. And the program, instead of saying like, first you write 5 novels and say your Hail Mary, and then we speak, the program will try to help the artists do what they're aiming for and not breaks them and indoctrinates them into some kind of a frame. And I'm saying that, as a writer, I feel it myself. I've published my first book more than 30 years ago. And when I published it, it made perfect sense. It took me 7 years to write it, and I published it, and it was great. Now, when I write a story, I say, I'm going to publish it in 7 years. Like, will I have a tail by then? Will I be a critic? So this stopped making sense. So I opened a Substack newsletter, and now I can tell my stories every week, and people can write to me and say, "Oh, we don't have to wait 7 years to tell you that it sucks. We can tell you immediately that you should find another profession." And suddenly you're engaged in a dialogue. So I'm saying that the same way that I feel that the needs of the stories are changing and leading me in different paths. I can tell you something, a personal story, but that basically many periods of my life I just write. So I'm alone in a room. It's a very tiny room. It used to be a restroom. You can't smell that, but it used to be a restroom, and I'm used to being alone. And there was something that when I wanted to artistically react to things that I experienced during COVID, I went and did a video dance with a friend during COVID when there was a curfew. I basically broke the curfew to do it. While when there was no curfew, I could lock down. So when there were no lockdowns in Israel, you can get confused. But I'm saying is that when there were no lockdown, I was alone in my room. The moment there was a lockdown, I find myself with 15 people trying not to kill each other. So I'm saying that there is some kind of a flexibility, because sometimes when you want to say something, then some mediums kind of react to it better than the others. So I would want the students to find the way, but at the same time be exposed to different attitudes to storytelling. And that's where I feel we're so lucky to have the support of so many creative advisors that they can go all the way from nonfiction to podcast to theater to film studies, and many of them are all arounders. There are people that they wrote fiction, they wrote nonfiction, they did a TV series, and in this sense, the idea of that you're not joining a sect or a clan, you're basically in this dynamic dialogue in which all the time we're here to try to help you find your unique way of expression.
Yeah, I think I want to emphasize that also, that we're really all genres, multi-genre, different. There are a couple questions that I have here in the chat. One is about poetry. Yes, absolutely poetry.
Of
And then
course.
about children's books. Absolutely children's books. You've written children's books, right, Edgar?
Yeah, I've written, yeah, and I must say that it's really like I write for adults, but I feel that I understand children much better.
Yeah, yeah. So really a breadth of audiences and a breadth of genres, right?
Yes.
So Edgar, you've talked also about wanting to reach people who aren't readers. So you want to reach people who are readers, but also people who are not usually readers.
Yes, look, I'm saying when I started, I think that we had this kind of structure where everybody knew that literature and books were important and central, and they could argue on which book should be read, and they could be apologetic if you didn't read enough. But right now, this reality doesn't exist. And I'm saying that it's not like for me, and I'm speaking about Israel. I'm sure that in the US the situation is different, and I hope better. But I'm saying that it's not really this difficulty that people don't read because they watch a lot of movies. I'm saying people don't read because in Israel they're immersed in the reality, or not in the reality, or the way that the reality is being communicated to them, and in the reaction to reality. So basically, you have this kind of feeling that if we used to be those people who said, we finish our work, we're sitting in a balcony and we're reading about a totally different word, then today our work is never done. Our work is never done because there's always this dumb guy on Facebook, that I need to block. And there is always this atrocity on the other side of the word that before technology was advanced, I didn't even know about it. But now that I know about it, I have to do something about it. So I feel that we're working so much in the word in a way that I think that most of the time does not affect the word. It's kind of like we're just spectators, kind of a Beavis and Butthead watching what's going on. But we have this kind of feeling of all the times that we're busy and we have all those chores, that delving into ourselves and imagining things and thinking about what interests us is something that we don't have space to. We just have to pick the right sign for the demonstration. But what are we really thinking? I don't know. What are we chanting? The stuff that our clan is chanting now. But in which way am I different from the people around me? This is the questions that we ask ourselves less and less.
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been a couple of questions, and I think this is an important point about ages and about diversity of our students. And for Etgar and me, we've talked a lot about we want the most diverse possible set of students. The Master's in Spiritual Care and Counseling that was started in my division, the youngest student in our first cohort was 25, and the oldest was 80. And I think that would be our hope, right? That we go, maybe 80 is not the limit. And so what would you say, Edgar, about ages and our welcoming of different ages?
Yeah, so I think that again we're living in a very kind of a orderly world, because I'm saying we live in a place where we have a identity politics, and when we talk to people, first we try to figure out who they are, and then we know already if we like them or don't like them, and then they say stuff, and we know if we should put them down or build them up, but everything is kind of decided on the data, which, by the way, I think it's very, very technological, because if you ask technology, give me all the people who are under 25 and they went to college, it's very, very easy, or all the women or the Hispanic people. But if you say, give me all the people with great sense of humor, then technology doesn't know how to work that well. Now, what we're doing, we're going to the other way. We just want to know that there are people who are imagining something that is interesting, who want to go in an interesting way. And I can say to you that, I'm teaching in Ben Gurion University. I can say to you that in the workshop that I have now, I have students that are as young as 22, and students that I would say probably over 60, so with grandchildren and stuff. And when I think about my students, I must say I need to actively think about it to tell you their age. I just know that there are those people who can go wild, those people who can surprise me, those people who don't surprise me as much. And if you ask me, I can tell you their gender, their age, their education, but basically it's something that is very, very inherent. And I remember that I once said in a workshop that I gave in the US, I said to them, all your tuition, you try to write the well-written story. And I said to them, how about we do an exercise where you write the badly written good story? And the badly written good story is basically an exercise saying form is important, craft is important, but in the bottom line, the best story that I got to hear in my life were from people who were the most passionate about them. And so some of those people were immigrants and they didn't speak the language well. And some of them were totally uneducated and didn't have the right words for things that they wanted to describe. But what made the stories powerful was that they were connected to the story and they owned it and they had the passion to tell it. And I'm saying that, that this really transcends everything. It's really like I'm saying, it's an MFA and we're academic and stuff. But I would say to you that for me to pick people who have like everybody has a story to tell, but to pick the best ones, I don't have any rule whatsoever. They come in all shapes and forms.
Great. So a few sort of tactical questions. People are asking about financial aid. So let me answer that question. We are hoping to have financial aid. And so I would say, please apply and ask for financial aid, and we will be determining that. But it seems very likely that we will have financial aid. Otherwise, the submission process, that's on the website. If it's not clear for any reason, just ask any questions. We are open, as Edgar's made, I think, really clear, to multiple genres, and people can submit poetry, they can submit, you can submit fiction, you can submit any
Graphic novels,
graphic
yeah.
novels, yeah. Or you can submit in a multitude of genres. And if you have questions about that, just let us know about what you need to submit.
And I also want to say that, that I think that people who are coming to study, then I'm sure we're going to have those people that know exactly what they want to do. They want to to write a three-part novel about something, and and that's amazing. But I'm saying that there is something in this program that it's also allowed to be lost. It's also allowed to come and say, I think I want to do something, but I want to see, like, I want to write fiction, but I want for a semester to have a mentor in poetry. Because I can tell you that I've been everywhere. I did everything. I wrote in rhymes for lyrics, and I wrote nonfiction work. I worked in the Israeli 60 Minutes directing documentary. Now, the idea is that all those things are things that you accumulate when you come to write a story. For example, when I started becoming a filmmaker, my descriptions in fiction had changed because I was used to look at, I understood, for example, I tell you the simplest thing that I think that every person who listens to us would understand. For example, when you write stories, you're not necessarily sensitive to the mise en scene. When I write a conversation, let's say I write a story about us, Lisa, it has a happy end. And in the story, when we speak, I don't think if we're standing or sitting. But the moment that you experiment with filmmaking, you really understand that, let's say, if I'll stand and you'll be sitting through the conversation, it will show how relaxed you are and how tense, or in my case, short I am. But this idea is that when you go somewhere, and you can return to what you naturally do. But I really think that that dentists go every year to those conferences. When they get drunk and they show them movies about new things that they can do with people's teeth. Now I'm saying artists don't have that, and I think that it is a strategy, to kind of fence your ground and say I'm here, and it's a good one. But I'm saying it's also a good thing for people who come to say, we're going to shop around. We want to do this, but we'll go to do other things, and we'll take stuff from them. So, for example, the poetry will affect the way that I write my metaphors in fiction. When, if I work on a monologue for a play, then I understand that when I write my stories, then maybe I should write it in a first person narrative and let the guy be a narrator. So I'm saying it all kinds of blends together, and that's what's amazing about it, because I think that that, let's say, if you had a desperate need to share or express something with us, then you would use English, you would use Yiddish, you would use Hebrew, you would use your hand, you would point at other people, you would spit at us if we won't behave. You would do all those things. And yet, I think that many times when you come and deal with craft, you say, I'm an expert to that, but I don't know how to do that. And that's one thing I would want to crack a little in the program.
Great. Great. I just want to answer a couple of questions that are a little bit more tactical again. A couple of people have asked about the size of the cohort. So we're launching. This is the first time we're doing this. We don't know how many applicants we would get. I am anticipating that we'll have somewhere between 8 and 20 students. I can't imagine we'll go over 20 for our first cohort. And I think, one thing is when you're in a new program, I've been in a lot of new programs. I love being at the early stages of the development of something. Obviously, that's why I do the work I do. And, you get a lot of attention because it will definitely be small. Let's say that. And then I think there have been a couple of questions, Edgar, about this moment, about, should people write about the Holocaust now when it's not, should people avoid writing about the Holocaust with Holocaust denial? And then another question that's sort of related is sometimes Jewish stories are not being received so well today. How do we manage that? So I'm combining those two questions.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that that we're living in times where Jews in the U.S. and across the world, experience a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of hate, and I, as a writer, especially an Israeli writer who, who's been traveling, then I can tell you that, events that I was supposed to do got canceled, and not from my political views and not from my activities, that were always in line, but I would say for my nationality. And, uh, and I really feel that there is this justified anxiety, among Jewish communities. I talk with many people, but at the same time, I want to say that this problem, it's not as if we're living in a perfect world in which anti-Semitism woke up. And I'm saying that when we live in this world of identity politics, in which immigrants eat cats, and they put something in your water and you wake up a woman, and in all this world of kind of segregation and fears and kind of this kind of phobia from everything that is different, then I'm saying that actually, if in the past there was something about anti-Semitism that was totally unlike anything around it, now kind of the word is stepping there. Like I'm saying, the protocols of the elders of Zion dealt with fakes about Jews. We put blood in matzahs, Today there are fakes about everybody, and I really feel that anti-Semitism is not going to disappear, and it may get greater. But I'm saying that I think that the thought that we will call the responsible adult, say, I don't know, the president of the US, and he'll call everybody to order, this is not something that is going to happen, because we're living in a world right now breaking into clans. I can't see any modern Western country that is not, let's say, either 3 steps away or 1 step away from a civil war. So I'm saying, so I think that it is very natural that when you have a problem and the problem is closest to you, then you look at it and you say, I built my worldview from this problem. But I think that, again, in ever-changing world, then it's beneficial to tell a wider story instead of, like, I'm saying, it's not fair and we don't have the chance and everything, but I'm saying the story should go well beyond complaining about the situation. It should be kind of offering alternative, explaining it, putting it into greater context, and not just saying this is wrong, because it is wrong, but we're living in a world that is very wrong right now.
Great, thank you. So I have 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. So one question is from someone in the audience, and then one question is from me. The first question is, what makes my story so vital or so important that other people would care about it? Writing and publishing stories is or can be a conscious act of vulnerability.
First of all, I agree that it's a conscious act of vulnerability. And I think that we're living in such an anxious world that it's very, very important for us to take those acts, and to just this idea of showing your vulnerability and seeing that you can survive it, or that nothing bad had happened. It's really like, I'm saying, I'm old enough that when I was a child, my parents didn't drive me from places to places. You had to go, even if it was a mile or 2 miles, and you were 6 years old, and and you have to do it on your own. And I know that today it may sound crazy to people and totally irresponsible, but I'm saying I don't want to calculate how many kids have disappeared in this time. I don't think any, but it doesn't matter. But for the case, maybe some had lost it. But I'm saying that I feel grateful for having a childhood in which I knew that it's okay to be alone in the yard, or to go and buy something in the kiosk, or to have a dialogue with somebody. Oh, it was risky, but the ability to deal with this risk, to cross the road on my own, was something that helped me cling and hold to this word, and so I think that the best way to try this is by writing. If I would ask people, I don't know, to model bikinis, then I could say, oh my God, this could be a very bad experience. But I'm saying, let's try with this idea. You close your eyes, you imagine something, you see a cat. This cat is doing something. Tell me what this cat is doing. So it's an act of vulnerability. But if I do something aggressive, then the cat in your mind would go away and no harm would be done. And I really, really feel that one of the things that art kind of gives you is the ability to deal with anxiety. Because I think that when you tell a story or you write a story, I think that many times when we see it in the creative MFA, is like, I wrote a story. Did it get to the New Yorker or didn't it get to the New Yorker? And when you do that, it can really put you in a very anxious mind. But I'm saying, when you write a story, when I write a story and somebody reads it, or when I read it to somebody, even if it's a bad story, it doesn't matter. I always feel that the air is moving, that something is happening, that I learn that that this joke wasn't funny, but okay, next time I write a similar joke, I know how to make it funny. I feel that somebody is getting something from what's happening in my mind instead of me being ashamed of that. So I'm saying it's not about putting your story on Mount Rushmore. It's basically that by the fact that you utter those words, you breathe, you excel. And I'm saying that it's really that I lived all my life, it's really like I'm saying, as a writer, by the way, I tell you the things that you're really, really afraid is what you did to me, saying, you're going to listen to this guy, he can tell great stories. It's always like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? But I'm saying that, when you go to literature festival, all the time you see that how they introduce writers as people who are some kind of like messiahs or high priests, or, oh, let's talk to these people who will tell us something, I mean, we all read Philip Roth, or or Jack Kerouac or whatever. Like, do I have anything? Would I want them to educate my kids? No. Or Kafka, would I leave him for 5 minutes with my child? No. The idea is that writers are not there to be perfect or smarter or anything. They're there to be honest and unique and original and show the word in a different way, or create a voice that didn't exist before that. And in that way, the moment that you're freed from putting this perfection bar, this New York Times critic bar, this I published here and you published there bar, and you just say, I feel lucky because I have a story in my mind and I'm going to write on a page and I'm going to read it to people in class and they're going to react to it. And that's what I'm going to do instead of being on Facebook. Then I'm lucky for that.
Fantastic. Okay, and final question. As I said when I was introducing you, talking to you has made me feel very happy, and hearing your stories has made me feel happy. And you said something about writing being pure joy. So I just want to talk a little about the joy. I want to just conclude with, why is it joyful?
And so I must say that I'm really happy to talk to you too. It's been fun kind of imagining it and doing it together. And I can tell you, there is something about me as a person that my wife says that I'm a rebel in that sense that, for example, I've been demonstrating for the past 2 years, okay, or more than that. And in all my life, when I demonstrate, I refuse to hold a sign that I didn't write myself, that I didn't phrase or even wrote in my own hand. And it's not like this kind of ideology. It's just instinctive. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you giving? I didn't say that, you know. And I'm saying that it's always this feeling that the word is kind of restraining me, and I kind of try to break loose. And I think that the joy of writing is basically that you are in this space, that what you're doing is not to impress people or to save their life or to have any pragmatic function in the world, you know, and you're just doing something because it's what you have in your mind, you know. There is no end game to that. And I think that this kind of purposelessness of the action makes it of such huge importance, because we're living in a world where we don't have purposelessness anymore. We really, everything that we're doing is so radically important. So this idea of doing something unimportant in a kind of a reverse way could in the end be the most important thing that you do in your life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Etgar. This has been really fascinating. And I
Thank
hope
you.
people have enjoyed it, and there are more to come. This is the first conversation. Etgar will be speaking with Jonathan Safran Foer on May 4th, and with many other of our creative advisors in the months to come. And I'm going to pass it over back to Ellie to wrap us up. You're on mute, Ellie.
I'm on mute and I have to remove spotlight, and I'm here. Hopefully you can see me. I want to thank Lisa and Etgar for such a wonderful conversation. Our chat has been filled up this whole time, and it's been so amazing. Like the nuts and bolts questions, the kind of the love of writing questions, the questions about like the world we live in. I very much enjoyed just even facilitating the questions to Lisa. And I very much enjoyed your responses, because it is so clear how much passion and joy this really brings you. And I'm so excited to see what comes out of this program. So thank you both for your time and energy. This is the last session of this series. So you would ask, what's next? Well, what's next is not what's next. We're actually going to be looking at some of the themes that are coming out of our convening. Tomorrow, JTS is launching a convening about Israel at the Crossroads. We're going to kick off that series on April 28th with a discussion with Rabbi Matt Berkowitz, who has a 24-year history at JTS. He is now the incoming president at the Schechter Institute in Israel, and he's going to be talking about art and Zionism, and I'm pretty excited about that. And we'll get more information out to you very quickly. So thank you to our sponsors again. We could not do this without them, and I so appreciate their assistance, Melissa Stoller and Yaroslav Farb. This is what I should have written down in the right place. But thank you both so much for your support, and thank you all for being here. And there's information about the MFA in the chat. Please, we hope you'll check it out and come back on May the 4th for our next conversation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Etgar.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Ellie, and thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.